Welcome to Middle Fingers Up, the show where we hold our heads high and our middle fingers higher. I'm your host, Kieran McKay. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Jia, a true pioneer in the creative arts world. Jia is an independent documentary filmmaker, passionately pursuing stories that delve into wrongful convictions. She's all about protecting the social order. Currently, she is investigating the inconsistencies of the American criminal justice system through, the compelling narratives of individuals whose freedom, and honestly, we can only imagine. I don't think many of us can even relate to what this can mean, but whose freedoms have been, restored at the cost of irreparable damage to their well-being, quality of life, relationships, and families, and the list goes on. Jia's debut documentary short Conviction premiered at the Greenwich International Film Festival. This is so exciting, garnering significant success with official selections at 17 festivals. The film earned accolades for Best Picture, Best Cinematography, an award of distinction, and is featured on Amazon Prime. Currently, she's in the final stages of post-production on the feature-length documentary of the same story, titled 16 Years. In 2022, Jia was honored with a Digital Trans DEI Award for her impactful work on the film and her podcast. Additionally, she also hosted numerous episodes of the Emmy Award-winning show The List. Like, oh my goodness, as you're all listening, this list goes on and on and on. I'm so inspired sitting here with a South Asian woman who has a resume like this, being part of the creative arts world. And the other really cool thing, if there's not 100 cool things, Jia's originally from Calgary, Alberta. She currently divides her time. She has family out in Calgary, so she goes between Calgary and New York City, where she resides with her husband and her son. And so in addition to filmmaking, can you believe I'm saying this? In addition, Jia has contributed to over 300 articles to Forbes magazine and various other business and fashion publications. She's also the founder and fashion designer of Studio 15. I'm really excited to hear about the story and that transition between her fashion design storytelling and to where she's at now with filmmaking. So let's welcome Jia. Jia, welcome. Please tell me if there's anything I missed, because we have such a list of you being part of the creative arts world. So did I get it?
Yeah, you totally did. And thank you for that intro and for having me.
Yeah, honestly, thank you for letting me have you. We were talking before recording, and I just want to, get this out here too. Honestly, it's so cool to meet another South Asian woman who went the creative arts route, because we are bred on the whole lawyer, doctor, engineer world. And so when you meet another fellow community member that didn't pursue that, or is, finding their creative light, through their accounting career or whatnot, you're like, yeah, this is amazing. Good work. So I think it's so cool to meet another woman that's so, living her dream, I would imagine, doing the work that so many of us wanted to, didn't think we could. So thank you for being one of the women out there that are paving the way for many of us that are trying to go back and get that dream that we really wanted to pursue.
It's so funny that you say that, because it was lawyer, doctor, and a third, was engineer. It wasn't good enough, but it was a third option. And that was the only options, that our parents ever give us. And so it was definitely an uphill battle, and they were not happy, and still kind of sometimes are not.
Yeah. Like, are you financially okay? Right. There's that, because you know the black and whites of finances when you pick those careers. And so as an artist, it's such a different adventure when it comes to having money in our bank account or whatnot. And so I can imagine that, are you okay mentality, even though you're like, yeah, I'm more than okay, actually.
Yep. I still get that today, and it's really funny.
Yeah, right. So,
and brown parents will always look at us as children. Like, no matter what age we get to, we're always going to be children, which is just another hilarious layer to the whole thing.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It is. Well, and yeah, I think that's hilarious. And I think what's cool about pursuing this is, like we often put so much on financially, that's traditional values, financially being successful in our community, in many communities. It's all the external shell. What's my car like? What's my house like? And so you obviously have to make some kind of money to have that life. And when you pick a creative world, it's like you're getting that big house and that big car without having the big house and the big car. You're thriving. You're getting so much out of the internal part, like, I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but it's like this external internal thing. And so I don't know. I think it takes a lot to go this route. So kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you.
All right. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about storytelling. You and I have this in common. We both share this. I tell stories, real life stories of people who are experiencing all sorts of growth with their mental health, learning about themselves, and so on. You tell stories as well, whether it be through fashion, as your most recent now adventure with filmmaking and exploring stories of folks that have lost their lives to this injustice that our criminal system has set up. And so I'm curious for you, where does the passion for storytelling come from for you?
It's funny. I didn't actually originally have a passion for storytelling at all. And then, not at all. And it's funny when I think back to like school days, I hated writing. Writing was like the thing I hated the most. Like I was really good at math, but writing was a chore. So it's really funny that I do this today, but it all started when my husband came home from work one day and said, "Hey, listen to this podcast." And this is before podcasts were a thing. Like they just started, and I said, "No, I'm not interested in podcasts." And I'm a very visual person. So I need podcasts don't keep my attention. My mind starts to wander. And then I realize 20 minutes later that I haven't been listening. And then I'm like, oh my God, now I got to rewind 20 more minutes. And so it just doesn't really work for me. It didn't used to work for me anyways. And so I said, no. And he was like, no, you don't understand. You have to listen to this story. It's a true crime story. And I've always been into true crime. And he said, it's a true crime story. And it's about a Pakistani family. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? You never hear about those two things. And you know how our culture is. Like, we don't air our dirty laundry. We won't talk about that stuff in a public space. And so I was like, I never hear true crime stories about Pakistani families. What is this? And so that piqued my interest. And I said, okay, fine. I'll listen to one episode. And it was the Serial podcast, which is like the biggest podcast of all time. And so we were eating dinner and I said, I'll listen to one over dinner. He played it and I was like hooked. And it was such great storytelling. And I was like, play the next one, like completely enamored with this thing. And he played, I think it was 4 episodes at the time that had been released. And I was like, play the next one. He was like, there's no more. And I was like, what do you mean there's no more? And he said they come out I believe, if I remember, this was back in 2015. So I think it was Thursdays at 6 p.m. If I remember correctly. And I was like, no way I can wait till Thursday. And he's like, you have no choice. Like, that's how podcasts work.
It's like binge listening. It's such a different thing, from binge watching. It's
Yes. And so every Thursday, like at 5 o'clock, I would text him, like, are you on your way home? Like, I cannot, if you're not home, I'm listening to it without you. Like, there's no chance I'm waiting another second. So anyways, I ended up listening to this whole thing and the story. Have you listened to it, by the way?
No, Serial, please tell us.
No. Oh, you have to listen. The very first season, it's about Adnan Syed, and he's a Pakistani born in the States, but immigrant parents living in Baltimore. And a girl that he dated the previous year turns up murdered. And the cops show up when it's such an intricate story, which I won't get into all of it, but the cops show up at like middle of the night, 4 or 5 a.m., rip him out of his bed in his parents' home, take him, arrest him, and he never comes home again. He gets charged with her murder and he was in prison still, and he was like 40 or something, or late 30s at the time when the podcast came out. And I listened to the whole thing, was incensed. I was like, and it was because of race for sure,
mm-hmm.
That they did this to him and he was innocent. And so I was just pissed. I was like, he reminded me of my brother. I have 2 brothers and he really reminded me of them. And even when they talked about his upbringing on Serial, they were like, oh, but he smoked weed. Oh, but one time he did this bad thing. And I was like, we all did those bad things. Like, we're not all murderers. This is insane,
Right.
And so long story short, at the time I was working in fashion and I thought, what can I do to help this guy? And so I made the Free Adnan shirts and they ended up going viral, like all over the world. And we raised money for his legal defense fund with those shirts. And that was a little bit of money. And I was like, what more can I do? Like, this isn't really moving the needle for anyone. And so I decided to host the very first fundraiser for his legal defense fund. And I did it here in New York. And we raised a few $1,000s in one night and we donated it to his family. And as a result of that whole process, I got to know his family. And now they've raised, I don't even know, $500,000. But at the time, that was the largest donation made to his legal defense fund because it was in the very beginning, you know? So the family was like really thankful. And where did this money come from all of a sudden kind of thing? And they were so sweet. And I got to know them really, really well. And they're good friends of mine today. And in the process, Adnan's post-conviction hearing came up. And so I went to it. And so I sat there with his family throughout this court hearing. And the prosecutor just played such dirty games. And he was trying to, Adnan had an alibi witness. And the prosecutor was trying to discredit this witness. And I was watching it thinking, this is our justice system. Like, instead of being like, oh, shit, there's an alibi witness, like maybe we got it wrong, they're just trying to win. They're not trying to find the truth. They're just trying to win. And I was disgusted and pissed. And so I was on the train ride home from Baltimore. And I was like, what more can I do? Because like this small fundraiser or these t-shirts aren't really helping the masses or even Adnan all that much, you know? And at the time, there was 2 documentaries I had just seen, Making a Murder and The Jinx. And they were huge, like millions of viewers. And in my naive, totally dumb way of thinking on my train ride home, I was like, I'm just going to make movies. That's how you get millions of eyeballs. People love movies and people don't always like to be like told to support a cause or always, you know, it's like, it's not fun, but movies are fun. And so it's like, it's a positive way, in a way that people like to spend their time to get a message across to them. That doesn't seem like you're preaching to them or something, you know? And so I thought that's what I would do. So I came home, researched a bunch of stuff, found a program at New York Film Academy that was starting soon because I wanted to do like now, you know, I'm a very like now or never type person. And so I enrolled into this film program and with the goal that I was going to make a film about wrongful convictions. And when I had done the fundraiser for Adnan, I had met a guy named Jeff, and he had a very similar story, almost identical to Adnan's. He was a 16-year-old boy in high school. A girl he knew was murdered, and if they pinned it on him, and he went to prison for her murder, and he didn't do it. And he's out now, and he was the speaker at my fundraiser for Adnan. So he was the only person I knew in real life that had lived this experience. So I called him and I said, hey, I'm thinking of making a movie. Would you let me tell your story? And he was like, sure. I was like, okay, great. So I go to school and I start filming him, and with the intention that everything I film, I'm going to use. So I made sure every assignment and everything that they gave us, I made sure I was filming stuff that was related to the cops and the courthouses and, you know, what have you. And at the very end of that program, once I finished that short film, one of the professors was watching it to help me with the final edit. And he goes, this is amazing. He's like, you need to submit this to film festivals. And I was like, what is a film festival? I had no idea what a film festival was. I'd never been to one. And he goes, he's like, well, we have an evening master class about film festivals. You should go take that class. And I said, okay. So then I enrolled into that evening class and I took it, and they taught you all about how to submit to festivals and what they are. And so I just took his advice and submitted my film. And then it ended up in getting into 17. It was selected at 17 film festivals. I think we've won like 6 awards, and it just took on a life of its own. But I was like, you know, obviously there's something here and it's working, so I'm going to keep doing it. And so then I just kept filming. And now, actually, just last month, we finished the feature film, and it's now being shopped around for distribution. And so everything just kind of snowballed.
All because you connected personally to a story, all because you felt, you know, you had this drive, you had this thing in you that's like, we got to do more, we got to do more. And I don't know, like there's a difference between you and so many of us that start with that. We're passionate about certain things. We feel, sometimes it's from our own experiences, but there's that whole imposter syndrome. There's that whole fear of risk taking. And so many of us just sort of say, well, no one's going to want to know this or what. What was different about you, and how come you didn't stop? Because you must have had moments where you're like, I don't know what I'm like. I can imagine people that have known you all your life calling them and saying, oh, I'm making a movie. And they would think she's having a mental health breakdown. Like, that's what I would imagine, right? Because you're saying this was never part of your life. Like, you just kind of decided this. So how did you decide not to to fall into the trap of, I can't do this. I've never done this. I don't know what I'm doing, to I'm going to go do this.
I have imposter syndrome all of the time. I mean, literally every day. And sometimes I'm in rooms with people and I'm like, I don't belong here, which is such a stupid way to think. No, the one thing I've learned, nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody is just either learning or learned it or trying or working it out or trying to move up or whatever.
Yeah.
And I try and keep that in my mind at all times. Like, even though somebody may seem like they got it all together, if you talk to them and they're real about it later, they're going to tell you that they were also had nerves and
their armpits were sweating just as much.
yeah, exactly. So I kind of try and keep it, but I have imposter syndrome all the time. But what made me not give into that and not do this thing was how incensed I was about Adnan and all the other people like him that are just sitting in prisons. Can you imagine? This is what I thought to myself when I was starting. I can't imagine not only your physical freedom being taken away, like sitting in a cell forever just seems crazy. But to me, for some reason, and of course I haven't lived it, so I could be totally wrong. But to me, what seemed like the more excruciating thing was the mental prison you would be in, to think that your loved ones, family members, friends think of you as this monster that could do this horrible thing. I don't know. I feel like I've never been in prison, so I don't know, but I feel like that might be harder to deal with, is people thinking you're something you're not and this terrible human being.
Yeah, because all we have, whether we're on this earth or gone, is our story, our integrity, our dignity. All that is part of our story, and it's told by others. And you're right. Like when we go, we have zero control of what's left. And here is this man that's growing up in prison and his prime years are taken. And now the believers and supporters that, were part of his life are thinking here's a murderer. Like, you're right. Like, I have such small connection for little life issues where, someone thinks you're gossiping or telling you something terrible and you're like, oh my God, I'm not a bad person. But this guy, his life has his dignity, his respect, everything's taken. When you talk to his family, when you talk to him, when you talk to even Jeffrey, and even through Speaking of Crime, your podcast, when you talk to your guests, what do they say about that? How is that restored? Because you do something unique. Not only, this isn't just true crime's passion where so many of us love binge watching these stories. Like, this is someone's real life. This isn't a blockbuster film that an actor did. This is someone's life. And so when you're working through this and telling their story, how do you help them capture that dignity and that respect and restore it? Because you work on the whole reintegration piece too through the work you do.
Yeah, it's funny, majority of them, of the people that I've worked with that have been wrongfully incarcerated, aren't able to restore it. It's just, they just can't. Too many years have went by. In a lot of these cases, because it's decades and decades, their loved ones have passed away. And they come out and there is nobody anymore, which, like, parents, grandparents and such. They didn't get married. They didn't have children. So there's all these kinds of things that they deal with, not everybody, but a lot of them. And then also for Jeff and other people like him, he grew up in prison and his most formative years were in a max security adult prison, at 17 years old. It's insane. And so there's so many after effects, with their personalities and what they can deal with and can't deal with. So it's not really restored. At all. Yeah. That's
difficult. I would imagine to process, and some of them probably also pass away. Like, it's being isolated in your mind. Okay, fine physically, but in your mind, you at some point, I wonder if you just start believing this fake story that people have told you is your truth, and you're, like, at what point do you start to say, well, I guess I did this then because I'm going to live my life in this cell.
Yeah, what's interesting? In one of the articles that was written about Jeff that we have in the film, he said that, exactly that. He said, sometimes I wondered if I did it because, the police are like telling you that this happened and that happened. And sometimes your mind can play tricks. Like, you can take things that you've heard and think you have a memory of something when you don't have a memory of that. It didn't really happen. For sure that can happen. It's so many mind tricks that these people deal with.
So just to jump to speaking of crime, your podcast, I want to tell you a little story. And this little tiny story is just to those listening that haven't heard this podcast, is just, this is how this wonderful woman that I'm speaking to tells a story. So yesterday I listened to Andre Brown's tail end of his story. And my son is in recreation. He comes out and I'm listening to this and he's like, first of all, he's like, oh, this is different. A, this isn't your podcast, Mom. And then B, you're not listening to music. So he's like, what are you listening to? And I'm like, shh, 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 like stop talking. And so he's like, no, like what? So I quickly tell him this is about a man that was, how many years was he wrongfully convicted for? Was it 20 years?
I think it's 23.
23. And did he spend the full 23 years in the prison?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the part of the story I'm listening to where Andre is talking about the day he's about to be released from prison and how he and his wife are planning to go and tell their children. And my son is listening and now is quiet. And I'm listening to this man who I don't know. You have no idea, but all I can hear are his words. And he's just genuinely saying, here's how it goes down. Here's what happens. And we're at the part where he's hiding in his home, waiting for his kids to come home, and he's going to jump out and surprise them. And as this is happening, his son sees his father after how many years and is jumping up and down and is excited and then looks at Mom and is like, wait, does he have to go back? And I tell you, Jia, my 10-year-old, so there's two generations sitting here together listening to this story, and my son's connecting to it as who would be this boy, and looks at me and is like, I'm going to cry, Mom. This is what my 10-year-old says. And I'm like, me too. And so we're bawling in the car yesterday, listening to this and thinking, like, these are things that are happening every day. And yet we are so far from it. We don't understand it. And a lot of it has to do with our privilege. Like we can't even fathom what that is. For you who's capturing these stories, whether it's through your podcast, whether it's through your film, how do you balance the information you're getting about your the people you're telling your stories about, and how do you balance that, and how do you have space between that and when you go home to your family?
It's so interesting because lots of people have asked me that, and it always sounds funny to say it this way, but I'm just going to say it. It actually is a great feeling. And I'll tell you the reason behind that is because these people that I talk to tell me time and time and time again. I mean, Andre, I talk to on a weekly basis still today, and Jeff, like that the whole process was so therapeutic for them. And to have someone just let them tell their whole story and just listen and then take that story and turn it into something that, can impact some change and that they also can keep and have and share. They thank me all the time, which feels weird, but also is very gratifying, because you feel like the work you're doing makes a difference and it's important. And especially if in any way it helps the people who went through this, because the one thing I think about all the time, and there was one, we can talk about this another time, but there was one incident in filming 16 years, the feature film I just finished, where I questioned, am I re-traumatizing these people? Like, should I not be doing this? Is this actually not good? And even in that moment, which was the craziest moment I've ever had doing this work, truly, it was with Jeff. Even after we came out of it and everything was okay, even then he came to me and I said, listen, we can just not put this in the film, like absolutely whatever you want, I'm absolutely not here to make anything harder for you. That's the furthest thing from what I want to do. And he said to me, no, he said, absolutely put this in the film. And it is in the film. And he said, absolutely put this in the film. He said, people should see what they did to me. And if they can't see it and they don't see it, then what was it all for? And even in like the moment where I questioned if my work was shit and I shouldn't be doing it, he still said that. Yeah. I get that all the time. So that's kind of how.
And what I kind of hear it from you too is this, I think in the mental health field where I see a similarity is this need to protect your clients. So it's like we decide somehow, you're deciding and wanting to be in control of something that you feel uncomfortable or like can't even, and I'm not saying you, but I'm saying those of us that we just can't. It's like when your child wants to tell you a traumatic thing that's happened to them, and you're the parent that's protecting around and thinking the best thing to do is just not talk about it. But like the client, your clients and those that go to therapy, it's like, I'm here because if I don't say something like they're saying, then what is the point? And also, I don't need to be protected. But I bet you that must feel so good for someone like Jeffrey or Andre, because who did protect them, right? These folks had to fight for themselves. When, and you're even saying with Anand too, that the fact that people start to lose hope for you. And so to have someone like you that's like reigniting a light, I think there's so much therapeutic process in that. That's fantastic. So it's kind of cool hearing you say it's exciting, because there's two ways. I was talking to a friend the other. There's two ways we can live. Bad things happen to many of us, and some worse than others. And there can be the guy that lives across the street from me I worry about him. You can tell bad things happen to him, and he takes it out on anyone and everyone that comes near his house. And that's how he's processing. And then you have someone that has bad things happening to them, and they decide they're going to use that as an opportunity for growth. And it's cool to be around people like yourself that are saying, let's go that latter route. And this happened. It's already happened. Can we not do something about it? Can we not teach others and educate others? And I think that's these stories are going to contribute to the crappy stats that we are living by in North America. If you want to add to that, or if there's something that kind of sparks or comes up when I say that.
Well, for sure. And you're right. You're absolutely right. I also, it makes me sad that you and your son, it made you cry, but on the flip side of that also, totally.
It's a good thing. I was proud to have a 10-year-old feel something like that. That's
what I was going to say. I remember being like 18 or so. And I don't know if you ever watched the Denzel movie, The Hurricane, back in the day.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That was about a wrongful conviction. It was a true story based on Reuben Carter's life. And I remember being not 10, so it's my point is that I saw that movie and it was a wrongful conviction. It stuck with me. So when I heard a non-story, way later, decades later, I was like, oh my God, it's the same thing all over again. This is a real problem that really happens, and cops aren't always the good guys, which actually, funny enough, was my perception. Being a 5 foot tall woman, I mean, I got pulled over. The cops always let me off on my tickets. I was like, oh, the cops are good guys,
Mm-hmm.
And so to learn that they're not always the good guys is an important thing to know, especially for people of color, right? And so for your son to have this little seed planted now, who knows later on,
Mm-hmm.
What he'll see and what he'll make of it. But I think it's important, because that's what happened when I was younger. That's what kind of planted the seed was Reuben Carter's story for me. And then Denzel movie,
It's the beauty of not growing up in privilege. And I think you see things from a different point of view that I think honestly is a privilege, like to say, oh, I can connect this. And I always have a problem with statistics, because it's like, who did you ask? And often they're not people of color. And there's all sorts of, skewed results out there, but yet we live by those, right? 85% of these people would say their community is not racist, or their community's healthcare is thriving. And you're like, great, but everyone I talk to is maybe not agreeing. And so what I love that you're doing, and I'm a big fan of this, is kind of challenging those statistics and bringing out impactful stories, because I think a lot of people that hide behind stats struggle with understanding and knowing how to feel impact when someone tells you a story. So we quickly go to numbers. And I'm hearing a lot more folks like you and listeners out there, they're like, no, I want to know these impactful stories, because they're going to help me understand what's actually happening in the world. And hiding behind numbers isn't going to be beneficial. Like you can say 70% of people say this, but you hear Andre Brown's story and that's one person, and that beats all those numbers to me. You know what I mean? Because it's a real life person.
For sure. For sure. Absolutely. I don't want to paint this with a positive brush, because it's definitely, all of these people have so much trauma that they've dealt with. But the one thing that I've noticed that has been shocking to me, I mean, truly shocking, like as a human being and as someone who loves psychology and like how we all work, like our minds and, human beings, the thing I've noticed is, and Andre was really a big one for me, is that these people have been wrongfully incarcerated and they come out, and now I know like 20 people or more actually that have been wrongfully incarcerated. They are some of the kindest, most gentlest, most wonderful people I have ever known in my life. And I've wondered how that's possible, because I always think if that was me in there, I would be angry and I'd be pissed and I would hate everybody that everybody along the way that played a part. But they're not like that. And I think it's because when everything is taken away and you have nothing left, the only thing you can have is peace of mind. But they have such a zest for life, and I feel like they understand the meaning of life more than any friend I have, more than anyone that I know in my life that has never been incarcerated. And it's been a really surprising and wonderful thing to experience. I don't know how to like put it into words. I'll tell you a short story about Andre. I was at this event and it was supposed to be an hour long. It was the middle of winter in New York, and it ended up going for like 4.5 hours. We were freezing. Like our fingers were going to fall off, and I was filming it. And this is the day that I met Andre. Jeff was at this event, and I walked up to Jeff after. I was like, "Hey, Jeff," and Jeff and I were like, "Oh my God, like this thing never ended, and we're so cold." And we were just like bitching about it because we were like, "This sucks." And then Jeff turns around. He's like, "Meet my friend Andre." And the other interesting thing about Andre is Jeff freed Andre. He was co-counsel on Andre's case. That was the first person he freed once he became a lawyer. So, I mean,
that's the name story. Jeff that I was hearing, because Jeff was there the day that Andre got out of prison.
Yes.
And so he's talking about his lawyer. Yes. And thank you for connecting that. That's, oh my goodness.
Oscar and Jeff, but Jeff was part of the team. Wow. So he introduced me. He's like, "Here's my friend, Andre." And I was like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And, he's 6'4" or something, and he's got a presence. And his smile is like ear to ear. It's like this big. And me and Jeff are just complaining. And he goes, all of a sudden, I just met this guy, don't know him at all. And he's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day." And I'm like, "Who the F is this guy? Like, I am miserable right now, And I was like, "What's with this dude?" Like, and then Jeff ended up telling me he'd been free for only, I think, 11 days. Like, he just got out 11 days ago after 24 years, I think it is. And I was like, wow. And that was where I was first like, he just gets the meaning of life. Like, Jeff and I are wrong. He is right. Like, why are we complaining about this cold weather? Like, we are so lucky to be here. It's remarkable.
It is. The meaning to life, when you can understand it, how to, like what I hear with Andre, he's so appreciative of life. He is so grateful. There's so much gratitude in what he's saying. And when we meet those folks that have that kind of gratitude, it's like reigniting something. It's this energy, and you're like, "Oh, you're right. How come I don't see it that way?" And we take things for advantage all day and every day, because like you said, we don't know what it's like to have our freedom taken away, those of us that don't know. And so when you try to explain that, honestly, the best way to do it is to watch your movie and listen to your episodes on your podcast, because if a 10-year-old can connect to it in less than 5 minutes of listening, because the drive from jiu-jitsu to home was 5 minutes, there's so many of us that would have our compassion restored, I think, and have a little bit of more of an understanding of what it means to live and breathe air that when you want to, not when people are telling you you can come and go. Okay, so we talked a little bit about your podcast. We've talked a little bit about your movie. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today that maybe we haven't covered, or a story that you want to leave us with today?
I don't think so. I think it was a great conversation, and
I know people listening are going to say, "Why is she already leaving, Kieran? You do 2-hour episodes." And that's going to be what the feedback is. But maybe that'll be a little bit of a way to get you to come back. And, folks will probably appreciate that. So maybe you can leave us with some advice, and maybe we can go back to where we started, which was that whole lawyer, doctor, engineer thing. You pursued a passion, something that was missing. You found an answer to. You went filmmaking. You taught yourself this industry. So for folks out there listening that have put away their childhood dreams, have tucked away their hopes of wanting to be something when they grow up and never got there, is there something you can leave with those of us that are listening? What is one way to maybe go back to that creativity, go find that extra little zing in our life that maybe we've tucked away?
For me, I think the advice I would give is to really pay attention to whatever you really enjoy doing. Like I had never made a film or done anything in filmmaking whatsoever, but I'd always done photography. I'd done photography for 20 years, just as a hobby on the side, just for fun. Sometimes small paid gigs here and there, mostly just for fun. And so when I was on that bus ride coming home from Baltimore, I was like, what can I do to raise more awareness? And what I thought to myself is, what tools do I have that I enjoy and that I'm good at? And I thought photography. And that's what led me to think, oh, well, maybe I could use my camera to, like make that leap to filmmaking. And it was only because I really like my happiest times are when I'm shooting.
Yeah.
I just love it. It's so fun for me. I'm passionate about it. And so I think I would say that. Think about what you really enjoy. If it's just talking to people, maybe it's a podcast. If it's telling people stories, if it's, photography, then maybe it's photo projects or filmmaking. It can be anything, and whatever your strengths are, use those and really lean into those, I would say.
Perfect. And we didn't get a chance to do our middle fingers up, so let's end with that. So usually we do that at the beginning. So what is one thing that you want to put your middle fingers up to today?
I think in this whole process, the thing that's disgusted me the most is these people who go into these fields of work, police, detectives, lawyers, who
Guards.
then use their position, to do things like wrongfully convict children and people. I mean, it's the worst of the worst. Like your job is to do the opposite, that's just, it's disgusting,
Yeah. What hope do you have for the justice system? Like what in telling these stories and the work you're doing and how you're contributing, you're going back to it. So there must be hope. So what is driving that to maybe make a bit of a change?
Honestly, I don't have much faith in the justice system changing. I truly don't. To me, it feels like such a huge machine that I don't even know how would you change it. But then there's people like Jeff who are constantly like, working on passing bills and stuff to actually change laws. And he actually has. And so it's people that have that capacity. I am not one of those people. I don't have the patience. I don't have the knowledge. I know what my shortcomings are and I could not do that. But what I do want to do, and the reason Adnan's story like really just hit a nerve with me is because I have to tell you this one last story because you'll appreciate this. But I was at Adnan's post-conviction hearing driving back to home with Adnan's mom and brother, because every day they were so sweet. I was staying in a hotel the very first day. They were like, where are you staying? And I said, a hotel. They're like, absolutely not. Because you know how brown people are.
Yes, I do.
They took me to my hotel, packed up my things and were like, you're staying with us. And like a family friend who had an extra room took me and I stayed with her. And it was the sweetest thing. And so every day now I would drive back and forth with the family to the courthouse. It was like a 5-day thing. And one day we were driving back and Adnan's mom, Shamim Auntie, said, I don't understand what happened. And I was like, what? It's like day 3 or 4. How do you not know what's happening? I was dumbfounded. And so then I explained it to her in Urdu. And she was like, what? And I was like, yes, they're totally just doing the same thing to your son all over again. So railroading him. And in that moment, I was like, this is so fucked up. Sorry.
It is fucked up. You're right.
Yeah, it is. And so in that moment, I was like, I want to help. The way I think I can help is, and it's my goal, is to tell the stories of South Asian families who are stuck in the justice system wrongfully, because I saw firsthand the language barriers and the disconnect for the parents who are immigrants here. And as somebody who was lucky enough to, I wasn't born here, but I've been here since I was like 2. So for somebody who's lucky enough to not have the language barriers, but still understand our culture and our language, I felt like I could be of service in that way to help the parents understand what's happening and, translate things for them between the lawyers and them and stuff like that. And so that's what I really want to do. And that's where I think I could make a difference, because I feel like I can use, my tools and what I have to help somebody. But with the justice system, I feel like it's way too big of a thing to tackle.
You're right. It's out of control. It's so much settler colonization history when you have institutions like our courts, our education, and how they were put together in North America. And then, for anyone that's of color, you have to assimilate. You have to figure out how to work around that. And to have someone like you know that and understand that. I think that's the privilege of East and West, the bridge that you are building between both. And that is beautiful. And I think that's more than just a small contribution. Like that mom, that auntie, ask her and she will tell you that probably was the biggest life change, because now she can actually communicate and understand what's happening. So to me, please keep doing what you're doing. And if there's a way others can help and be part of this, I'd love to put that up when we put this episode out. I'd love to connect and also give back with you, because I think it's an inspiration what you're doing, and it's sad to think about that because of where it's coming from. But hey, right, like your good friend Andre says, like, you got to find the beauty in this. You got to figure out how we can find joy in this. And so thank you for all that you are doing. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you for sharing your platform, with me and sharing the story. It's awesome.
And I always, anytime there's another South Asian woman, this is a third time apart from my family members, I always say, like, it's so cool, brown girl to brown girl, to be able to do this, because how much were we taught growing up to fight each other and be against each other? And, there can only be one of us in the room. And it's so cool that there's so many today in the arts world that are making room for others to join. And I just think, oh, this is like a wonderful way to give back to our 20s and our childhood where we, there wasn't room for that. So
sure.
Anything you want to add before we check out here?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, for everyone listening, these conversations are door openers. And so if you want to be part of this conversation, if you have any questions, anything you'd like to contribute, you know where you can find us. Really appreciate you joining us, Jia. And hopefully we can get you back to talk a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, anytime.